Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Arrow, as well as the latest episode of Black Lightning. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Arrow, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Black Lightning. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Arrow. So let's jump right into it. Obviously, in this episode, it is revealed to Oliver that Emiko is his sister, which is interesting because that breakdown I thought was kind of interesting because it went levels I didn't even really think about. Just the whole, because for Oliver, it's like, yes, he always knew his dad had secrets. I mean, everything he's done up to this point has been about correcting his father's secrets, all the dirty things, not just his father, but his family in general was mixed up in. So it's like now finding out not only do you have another sibling out there, this is from a secret family that your father abandoned. Because it's like for Oliver, it's like, it's interesting, and I thought that was kind of nice how they did that because they brought all of the whole aspect about like Oliver's dad, like his secrets back into the storyline, and then that's why, because it was kind of set up for the big reveal that like, oh no, Oliver's dad still has way more secrets out there. And so Oliver is pissed because I'm sure it's like years later, you're still finding skeletons in your father's closet. And that's a sad situation about it. I even love that, little Elseworld line of being like, oh yeah, Felicity being like, oh yeah, this has to be shocking. I mean, not as shocking as you being the Flash and teaming up with Batwoman, but still shocking. I'm like, and there we go, the final, line talking about referencing the crossover. So like I said, I figured it'd be one line, one scene in each show, and it has been. So nevertheless, but it's heartbreaking and for Oliver too, because it's kind of like, because for him it's like, if my father could, these are people he claims to love that he just abandoned. And it's like, if that's the case, then like, who's to say my dad actually loved anyone but himself? The fact of the matter is, and it's sad that Oliver even has to question his father's love in that regard, because it's just kind of, because he idolizes it and he looked up to his dad, but it's like the more time passes by, the more and more he feels like my dad was not a good person. Because on some level, it's almost kind of messed up because his dad's up here telling him to correct his mistakes. And now it's like, because you had a whole slew of mistakes that you weren't able to correct. Because it's like, is it just because you didn't have the chance to correct them? Or was it just because you just weren't strong enough to do it? Like, I'm wondering about that. I mean, it turns out he actually left a note for Walter to take care of Emiko as well as Emiko's mom. But his Oliver's mom hid it away, so Walter never got the note, which we haven't seen Walter in his continuity in a long time. It's been a while since, I feel like that was like, what, season 2 or 3 was like the last time he popped out. I want to say it was like season 2, but I could be misremembering. But the fact of the matter is, it's kind of interesting because obviously that's in it. Colin Salmon, the actor who played Walter, currently, General Zod on Krypton. I talked about that when I was talking about season 1 of Krypton. But nevertheless, but so he never got that letter. So this entire time they've been, well, because it doesn't make it any better. Because Oliver's dad's been gone for what? At this point, well, that's still a good chunk of change then. Because I forgot, because it's like, yeah, there's a 5-year time skip plus the 5 to 6 years has been, so that's 10 to 11 years. So that's a lot more significant than I was kind of really thinking in my head, because he's been gone that long. So, I mean, plus like all the time in between before then too, that she had to grow up without really knowing him. He probably popped in every once in a while, but it's like, it's even sad to think about that, because it's like, I guess because the reason why she did that was because I guess she didn't want there to be a chance that Emiko or her mom would come trying to claim some of the queen, name as their own. So it's probably like she wanted everything for Oliver and Thea, who were both her kids. Even though Thea was by Malcolm, that was still her kid nonetheless. Which that's also another thing too. Like Oliver's always finding, because all his siblings are his half siblings, because Thea is his half sister as well. So, but I mean, it never changed anything. But he grew up believing that was his full sister his entire life. But even after finding out, oh, she's only my half sister, it doesn't change anything. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how Oliver and her react because interact. I mean, it's because Oliver, Felicity puts it to him like, the fact of the matter is, I know you don't want to get mixed up in that necessarily right now, because he doesn't want to just jump into her life. Like, she's led an entire life never really having that connection to him or really their family like that. So it's like, who am I to really jump into your life and kind of say anything? It just doesn't feel right after everything that you've never had. Like, I'm sure it makes Oliver feel even worse, because like, let's not forget who he was at the beginning, before Leanne knew who he was. He was a spoiled rich kid. And so for him, it's like, well, I was all living up my life like that, being the asshole I was. You and your mom were struggling, but it's like they had each other at the very least. It seems like her mom only recently died. That's what sparked all of this now. Because Emiko, like, her mom was killed in the Glades. It's like, it was a fire and it's the Glades, so people are going to take a long time to get there anyway. But it turns out she was killed even before then. So it's like, for one, that's what Emiko's whole mission is. Like, it's kind of interesting. Like, Oliver's mission was technically a mission of revenge, but it was more so almost like a mission of redemption, of trying to correct the mistakes. But I guess you could still call it a revenge mission. Because it's actually kind of interesting, because when it all came down to it, Renee actually kind of pointed out the fact of the matter. And he pointed out something I thought was kind of interesting, because he was like, he used to be so angry, and he was like, until he met Oliver and he transferred that anger, Oliver and the team kind of helped him transfer that anger into kind of being something more positive, into taking that energy to help people. And now think about it, it's like, wow, yeah, Renee, he has his moments of kind of doing his own thing, but he is not nearly as rambunctious and as angry as he was when we first met him back in season 5. That's kind of interesting, showing you just how much he's grown in that time too. And I think that's a nice pairing with Emiko, because I think when Renee looks at her, I'm sure he sees a little bit. I mean, he sees a lot of himself, but I'm sure he also sees a bits of Oliver, because it's like the whole handling things on her own as well. Because that's something that took Oliver a while to kind of learn that. Like, he built the team, and then he started thinking like, oh, I can do this on my own, until he realized he couldn't, that he shouldn't. And so it looks like that's something Emiko's slowly probably going to have to learn herself about, like, not trying to handle all of this on your own, because you can't. To the point she's even welcoming Renee in. And the interesting thing too is that Zoe's the one pushing him towards it. He's like, yeah, this whole partnership thing, she's the one kind of pushing me to do it. Even bringing in Curtis and everything. And even Emiko's saying the line of suit up, and Curtis is like, yeah, it is what time I thought it was, and kind of getting all geeky and excited. So it's actually kind of interesting too, because for another reason why Renee is all doing all of this and helping her, because for him it's like, ever since Oliver got locked up, everyone that was his friends, a part of this team and everything, went their separate ways. They've all found their own ways to be heroes, except, Dinah's working with the SCPD, Curtis and Diggle are, at Argus, Felicity and Oliver are kind of doing their thing now too, so it's just kind of like, he's kind of left alone of like, so what do I do, So I think it's kind of interesting, because it's not this operation that it was before, and so I think that kind of makes the interesting parallels, because it's like he's off on his own just like Emiko is. So it's like, rather than be alone by ourselves, why not be a duo, a team, to kind of work on this together. So even when it was all said and done, though, it turns out that for Emiko, her mom wasn't killed by the guy that she was hunting down, because he wasn't even in town around that time. So it was a setup, but for what purpose? Because at the end of the day, she's trying to figure out, why was my mom killed? Does this have anything to do with her being part of the Queen family? I mean, why? If that was the case, why now? Like, what is this all about? Maybe it wasn't just the Queens that had their secret. Maybe even Emiko's mom had a few of her own. So that's something to think about. because it's interesting, because obviously while we're dealing with this in the past, we're also jumping to in the future where Renee is mayor. No shock there. Working with Oliver in the past and eventually working with Lance. Now it kind of makes sense. For him, it's all about building up the Glades. He doesn't care about the rest of Star City because for so long, the rest of Star City never cared about the Glades. So it's kind of like the roles have kind of been reversed. And so he also has this system known as the Archer system. It almost kind of reminds, I guess that's what it's kind of built on. It's kind of like a system that's tapped into all the surveillance and stuff like that. It's kind of like that program. I mean, it might be the exact same thing because once again, I don't remember those movies as well. But from the Batman movies, which one was that? I think that was, I mean, was the Dark Knight Rise, the Dark Knight Rises, like, was that, because I remember it shuts down by the end of the movie because Lucius Fox was kind of running that whole, like, I'm curious, is that the same program, or at the very least is it a very similar thing? I don't remember, but it seems like it just scans everything. It's kind of like, if I had to compare it to anything else, if you're familiar with Person of Interest, it's kind of like The Machine, how The Machine is kind of tapped into it. It seems kind of like that too in that regard. So it brought up a lot of interesting things to the point that, like, even Renee, like, it's so interesting because of the parallels, because you have Renee in the present being gung-ho about going all wild dog, but in the future he's like, that was stupid. I do more now as mayor as I could running around with a hockey mask. Thinking I was doing something when in actuality I didn't do anything that mattered. And then, you know, you have Dinah being like, it did matter. So part of me, and the fact of the matter is, like, we haven't seen Emiko, even though they're working together and stuff like that. Whatever happens to Emiko makes me think that's what finally pushed Renee over the edge to be like, this isn't worth it. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I guess it's not just her, but maybe even more beyond that. It's just like Star City just became overrun and it just crime after crime, and it was just too much. Even the whole vigilante route wasn't enough to really settle that. So it probably made him go, like, it was all kind of not worth it, because no matter what we did, it never made a dent in anything, you know. So, but like I said, it kind of makes you think something might have happened to Emiko just because we don't see them together. I mean, to be fair, they might be kind of hiding that. Who knows? I mean, supposedly Felicity's dead. But even Dinah bringing up the fact is that if she has to, she will, you know, beat Renee, which it seems like she did, because she ended up getting the codes to the Archer system potentially, or at the very least, she didn't have to fight him, but she probably, you know, twisted his arm in that regard. What's interesting though is Renee isn't directly connected to this. Like, the dude that he's working with seems to be. He even talks about killing Felicity because she was becoming a problem. I don't think Felicity's actually dead. She's probably faking her death potentially. But Renee's acting like he's okay. Like, he's okay with building up the Glades, but not if it means destroying the rest of Star City. But this dude is like, Star City's a cancer. To get rid of that cancer, you have to cut it away. And to do that, you have to just, you know, for the Glades to rise, the rest of Star City has to fall, essentially. Because the rest of Star City is where all the infestation comes from. Because the Glades crime is down, and it just kind of become, I guess, almost like this utopian area in a regard, which is interesting. But we do see that Renee, he's playing along like he is okay with it, but he's not. And I think, you know, hearing Dinah say, like, oh, that promise you and me and Rory and, you know, Felicity and Oliver all made all that time ago. Because we still also haven't seen Curtis in all of this either. Because we, once again, it's like, if this, you know, with everything in the future and stuff, we know that John's not around. We don't know if Lila's necessarily around. I'd assume so, because I don't remember John Jr. saying anything. Once again, it's been years since I saw that episode back in season 1 of Legends, so there's still a lot of the team that I'm sure that's something we're going to fill out as the season progresses, kind of finding out where everyone is and what they've kind of been up to, what led them to, you know, because even taking Roy, for example, it's like the last time we saw him, he was with Nissa and Thea, and it's like, now you're back. It's like, what happened? You know, it makes me think things didn't work out well on that front, but we'll kind of have to wait and see. But even with that all being said and done, even Dinah hasn't given up hope in Renee, because she's like, I still see the good in him, even though he is a little lost. It's like, so Zoe, don't, you know, lose hope in me. Because it's interesting, because even Dinah was like, your daughter used to idolize you, look up to you as a hero, and you don't realize how much you're hurting her now, because I guess it's like, I'm sure he's the one that kind of pushes for the whole anti-vigilante situation, but like I said, we'll see, which is interesting considering the fact that he was such a big component pushing for the Vigilante Act and stuff like that. So it's actually kind of interesting. It wasn't a big part of the episode, but it was kind of a little bit of, Oliver working with the SCPD. I have to pause every time because I'm so used to it. I almost want to say GCPD every time I have to stop to be like Star City Police Department. But nevertheless, the lady, I guess she's forensics, picks up. It's like, I don't touch that. It's like, yeah, you're so used to kind of doing whatever you want to at crime scenes and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, not everyone's too happy about the Green Arrow working and kind of being more official and everything, but still. It was just kind of an interesting little thing, so. But I'm very interested to kind of see where all this ends up going in that regard. Obviously, everything going on with the future, but also where we are present day. I'm almost leaving out the other big thing in this episode, and that's the whole Diaz and Argus situation. They're looking for this criminal, Dante, to the point that even Diggo's like, okay, you help us capture Dante, you go free. Once again, it's like, this is the man that you cause so much damage to everyone's lives, like, especially more recently Felicity's, like, the whole reason why William got sent away and everything. But I mean, that was the whole point of like, yeah, we can't tell Oliver or Felicity about this because they wouldn't understand, What's also interesting is to cover them for what they're doing. Diggle's saying like, oh, they're bringing back the Ghost program, what is essentially the Suicide Squad program from earlier in Arrow, that apparently Lila had shut it down after Amanda Waller had died. So now they're kind of resurrecting it, mainly because Diggle made that announcement. Yes, it gives them good cover for what they're really doing, but it's like for her, it's like, I wanted nothing to do with that program. You know how important it was for me to shut that down, and you do that. You undermine my authority, and you go against me like that. For her, it's like, I was worried about me becoming like Amanda Waller, and lo and behold, it's you, which is like, that's kind of saying a lot to Diggle, like being like, no, you're the Amanda Waller in this situation. It's like, yikes. Because even I was kind of under the impression, like, I was actually surprised, because I was like, kind of like, yeah, especially in certain regards, I would have assumed Lila would have become a lot more like Amanda, but she managed not to in certain regards. So now we have Diaz with the bomb in his head, and now it's a thing of like, he even saying like, oh, you better hope this kills me, because if it doesn't, I'm coming after you. So obviously, this is definitely going to be interesting. I'm curious to see, are we going to get any more of a team built around him? Is it going to be other like DC villains that, of the same tier? Because probably not. I don't know. It might be people we might be familiar with. It might not be. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what this is all about, what this whole Dante thing ends up being about. And, is that something that's eventually going to connect to the future arc or not? Because that's the thing. You're always wondering, like, what's connected to just now? And you'd assume everything that's happening present day is going to connect to the future in some shape or form. I mean, everything that happens now is going to eventually lead to there. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out, especially when we end with Oliver meeting with his sister. It's so interesting because she's all about embracing the darkness, and Oliver has struggled with that so much. Because it's like, do I embrace the darkness? Do I not? Is the darkness always going to be a part of me? Like, that's something he's still struggling with, that whole identity aspect. And so it's interesting to see that she's potentially in the early stages of it, So I'm definitely interested, because I'm sure when Oliver looks at her now, it's going to be, this was me as the Hood year one out of... I know, funny me saying that. Just a whole Batman thing, and also, like, obviously there's a Green Arrow comparison, the TV show Arrow comparison to Batman in general, but nevertheless, it's like, seeing her the way she is now is probably going to make him reminiscent of who he was the moment he came off Lian Yu. Because even at this point in time, he's still learning and still trying to balance that out. So, like I said, I'm very interested to see where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Black Lightning. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. We're continuing the whole situation with Jennifer and Khalil. It's actually kind of interesting that we actually got to see where Khalil chilled out. And it was actually kind of a sweet spot. It's basically like an abandoned train car that he basically made into his own pad. That was pretty sweet. But it's kind of interesting, like, Jennifer and Khalil were so content on like, no, we're gonna run. We're gonna go here, go there. No, let's not stay in the States. What language should we learn? French. Oh, I ain't mad at French. And they're kind of planning everything ahead and stuff like that. But it took Lynn showing up to kind of make. I think it's probably like Jennifer hearing the desperation in her mother's voice and her being so scared. It's one thing to think and maybe believe she's scared, but to hear her voice yourself and hear how heartbroken she is and how scared she is, I think that cemented in Jennifer's mind. Because I think it's a situation of, once again, they make the analogy too of comparing this to like Romeo and Juliet, and it's like it's so easy to kind of get caught up in this whirlwind, an exciting relationship and stuff like that. You're on a run, love's in the air, but then reality kind of sinks back in when your mom shows up, and it makes her realize like, what are we doing? We're not really thinking this through, like, because Khalil's like, no, we made it on our own these past couple of days. Shouldn't that say something? But it's like, yeah, it should, yes, but the fact of the matter is we can't do this on our own. Like, the fact of the matter is, like Lynn was saying, like, running away won't solve anything. You're just going to end up hurt or even worse. I mean, the fact of the matter is, yeah, they've handled themselves, but they were just like, they've literally got Cutter on their back and everything. And it's actually kind of interesting because it finally sits in for Khalil, because it's like, he'll come after us, and then he's like, no, he'll come after me. He's like, I've been so caught up in everything, too, that I haven't even thought about the fact of the matter is, you're not even, like, he gave her moments to say, like, no, go back home. But at the same time, it's like, I think he let himself constantly forget. It's like, Tobias isn't after both of them. He's only after him. It's like, I dragged you into this. You're like, because for Jennifer, it's like, I don't want to go back to that prison, but that, that being their house. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, they can't keep running forever because that's not a solution. I mean, and going back to it, like, you can tell how desperate Lynn is because she's showing up. She handled the whole thing with seeing Khalil's dad herself, which Jeff was like, no more handling stuff without backup. Even showing up, being like, no, we're not going to pair up and look. We're going to split up and look, So, but I love that, because I'm actually kind of surprised that, like, it turned around like this, because I expected, well, things kind of end sadly. I'm kind of skipping around and stuff like that. Things kind of end sadly, but I feel like they could have ended way in a much worse way, in a sense of, like, it could have been a situation, because that's what Jennifer, that's what Jennifer's family was worried about, like, her potentially getting killed in the middle of all of this, because of something Jeff brings up later on too. It's like, yeah, like, without a doubt, Cutter would have killed you too, because Tobias would have been like, oh, she was in the way? Kill her too. She's too much trouble. Plus, at this point in time, Jennifer would know too much, so that's why Tobias would want to remove her from the equation and everything. But them coming back is something that Khalil pushed. So I'm sure he wanted to go back on his own, continue on his own, but maybe he had decided on his own, like, no, I'll come back too. I don't know. Or maybe it was just Jennifer purely, like, telling him to come back. But I love Jeff being like, you lucky my family here. I'd whoop your ass right now after everything he's done. But I also love the fact that he's like, are you worried that Tobias is going to find out that Jennifer's got powers, or that you're Black Lightning? And it's like, whoa. And Jennifer's like, Khalil's like, she didn't tell me. I figured it out. I'm not that stupid. Jennifer's got, like, electric abilities. Black Lightning and Thunder happened to show up to kind of help her. Which, once again, that's something that Tobias is borderlining on the way to figuring out. If he knew about Jennifer's abilities, that'd probably tip him in the right direction too, but he doesn't know about Jennifer being a meta, so he just thinks like, there's gotta be something up with this, that Thunder and Black Lightning showing up to save the Pierce girl yet again. So that was kind of interesting. I also love the whole conversation between Henderson and Jefferson about the whole situation too, because it's like, you want to help this kid? Henderson's like, literally, this kid literally killed you. And Jeff is like, I know, but the fact of the matter is, Khalil, went down the wrong path. We know what he did was wrong. He knows what he did is wrong, and he made it up. Like, he's trying to make up for it. And Henderson's like, because in Jeff's mind, it's like, the fact of the matter is, if Khalil had never taken that bullet and gotten paralyzed like he did, who's to say he would be where he is right now? He'd be on a completely different path. But Henderson's like, yeah, bad stuff happens to other people too. They don't run around with a sociopath shooting green darts of poison into people's asses, so... But, for Jeff, it's like, it's not for Khalil he's doing this. He's doing this because he's someone that Jennifer cares about. He owes it to Jennifer to care about what happens to Khalil. And also, at the same time, it's like, he always had such faith in Khalil, and it's like, Khalil is proving himself to be the person I thought he was, And I think it took a very mature. It was a very mature decision to do that, especially because for Khalil, he knows coming back would be a death sentence for him if Tobias catches up to him. But he still came back because he wanted to return Jennifer and apologize and everything. The fact is, and he did it. He stuck around. It's not like he dropped Jennifer off and bounced or anything. He stuck around. I'm sure Jennifer would have been super pissed if he had just bounced and left. But still, it's like, get him to kind of testify against Tobias. And initially Jennifer's like, no, don't do that. But for Khalil, it's like, no, I got to do this. Like, the fact of the matter is Tobias is going to find me no matter where I go. This is the best chance of taking him down. So I never have to worry about that, because I'm sure also for Khalil, it's like, it's about doing the right thing, making up for all the bad stuff he did. He got a last chance to meet with his mom and everything. I'm skipping around, so I do apologize, but I'm surprised things ended the way they did. Yes, things ended suckily. They could have ended, you can make the argument worse, just because all this stuff about, when it's all said and done, Jennifer, is going to be you and me. The fact is, he's telling his mom he's going to see him. I'm like, dude, he's about to get killed or something. But it's like, nah, Tobias did. I'm sure in Khalil's mind, in all honesty, he'd probably say, I don't know. But for Khalil, like, that was brutal. He literally reached into Khalil's back and ripped out that thing that made him walk and gave him all the abilities and stuff like that. It's like, holy shit, that was brutal, dude. Holy crap, I wasn't expecting that. It seems like, obviously we're going, like, Khalil's going back to being paralyzed again, which is interesting. Like, it's this interesting, complicated, and sad thing, because it's like, obviously, like, the whole him and Jennifer thing never happened. So, and now it's probably going to be a situation where Khalil and Jennifer will probably have regrets, because it's like nothing ever happened in that regard, and based on the situation, may never will. That depends on that thing, because that thing might not be like, his spine might be in a position where it can't be reattached right now, because it would probably cause too much harm, or maybe it got too damaged, because it looked like it was still squirming. So maybe if it gets reattached within a certain amount of time, it could be of use. That also depends on Khalil. Does he want it back or not? Because maybe he might think, no. Maybe he's worried that he'd have to go through the same process again for it to be, like, he has to kind of work his way back up like he did before. And so it's like that all turned him into painkiller. So maybe he'd be afraid to do that again. It's like, no, I'll be Khalil even if I have to be paralyzed. That's my thought process on it. I don't know. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what ends up happening in that regard. It's sad that things kind of played out that way. Like, part of me is glad at the very least, or for now at the very least, he's alive, but and not unless he ends up bleeding out from that wound or whatever, or, complications arise because of it. Because something that's also got to be thought of, too, when it comes to all of this is that he's still able to testify potentially against Tobias. So is it supposed to be a deterrent, or does Tobias think, like, no, he'll eventually die from all that, whether it be like, an infection or something. Even leaving him in front for the Reverend and his people, his congregation, to prove a point of, like, yeah, don't mess with me. Like, you see what I did to him? I'm going to do a lot worse to you if you don't bend to what I want. And also, talking about all that, it's crazy on many different crazy things. One, Todd. Is it me, or does Todd seem like he quickly adapted to the situation, cracking jokes about Cutter like that, looking into her? It's like, no, I just want to do what's right for you, Mr. For you, Mr. Well. And he's like, and Tobias is like, oh, I appreciate the initiative, though, but don't mess around too much with real killers. And it's like, but the fact of the matter is, Todd's doing that. He's helping out and everything. It's like, Tobias is up to some very wrong and illegal stuff, but you're like, oh, it's outside the skirts of the law and everything like that. Who cares? It's like, I get you got some money and stuff like that, but I guess maybe the argument could be like, Todd was always kind of a bit of a mad genius, maybe, and so clicking with Tobias just kind of like, no, it works, it's perfect, it's fine, so maybe that's just what it is, Tobias just has a way of kind of tapping into that darkness. Maybe he just sees it in people, and he's like, oh, you've been kind of disenfranchised, like, let me, kind of build you back up into something. So that's just kind of interesting to me. I just felt like Todd jumped on that situation a little too quickly. The other crazy thing to me is Cutter by herself killed all those people. Those cops in particular. It's like, holy crap, I wasn't they've got guns trained on. We didn't even get to see it. Like, we've seen Cutter fight a little bit, but for her to be able to do that much, I mean, that's why I'm kind of like, I mean, I guess to be fair, she underestimated Jennifer, so that's kind of what caught her off guard. But it's kind of like, I guess, you know, meta abilities is very different than dealing with regular people and stuff like that. So it's just kind of interesting to me that she was able to do that, because that part of me was like, wait, was she not alone? Because let's not forget, there was that assassin dude previously who was getting called back to Freeland. I assumed that was Tobias, not unless that's someone else, not unless that's like an ASA type of situation that was kind of being called for or something. But that dude, he had like that teleportation ability and stuff like that. I was thinking maybe he popped up, showed up, and helped out, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. It seemed like, nah, Cutter simply did all that by herself, which is insane to think about. And then we also, you know, found out the mystery behind what, because it was interesting because Tobias was trying to get all these properties and stuff like that, because basically the system that he got from Proctor, that suitcase, all the information in there from the ASA was about all the kind of dirty people, like that councilman he was able to kind of blackmail. Is that he got all that information from the computer, and so he's trying to take advantage of it, because like the ASA was building up all this blackmail stuff for a reason, knowing where to go for these corrupt particular people and stuff like that. Even the whole going after the clinic is because of that too. So it's like he's following that plan. He doesn't know what it's all about either, but he got access to this information. It's like, oh, that area that the clinic's on is important to them for some reason, so it's going to be important to me. Like, even he only got access to a portion of, so even he doesn't know the grand scale of things until Todd gets into it later on with the MOD. It turns out that's where they originally gave out the vaccines 30 years ago, where the clinic is now. And so there are super metas somewhere in that area. I figured it had to be something like the moment it's like, oh, the moment that information was dropped about like, oh, that's where they originally gave out the vaccines and stuff. I was like, something's hidden there that the ASA wanted again. And it's like, now it's potential, and now we find out it's for metas in particular. Their vitals are still there. I mean, we saw what happened with the pod kids, that they were still fine and dandy after those 30 years. So I'm assuming these 4 particular metas are too, which that's going to be interesting, you know, Tobias with an army of his own like that. It's kind of interesting because most of his allies, you know, like Cyanide, his right-hand man, the whole painkiller, you know, Khalil situation, Khalil no longer on his side, like, he doesn't have a lot of people he can really turn to as a part of his inner circle, so getting them will kind of fill out his ranks again. Also, depending on what happens with the whole Cutter situation, whether she kind of sticks around or not. She's a hired gun and everything, sure, but it all comes down to what's going to happen with that. It's crazy to me that things have turned out the way they did. I kind of felt like I said, I didn't think that Khalil's situation would end up good, and especially the moment it was like, oh, he's going to testify. And like, taking down Tobias was never going to be that easy, but I'm sure this is going to be an even bigger deterrent from people to ever try and stand up to Tobias again, because they saw like, oh, look at Khalil, he's the perfect example of what not to do. And I'm curious to see in the long run, will Jennifer hold this against her parents, because it was Jeff's idea in the beginning. Khalil went along with it, but it was still Jeff's idea. To be fair, the fact is that this happened with a whole bunch of cops around means that sooner or later the exact same thing would have happened to Jennifer and Khalil, you know? So once again, it could have been worse because Jennifer would have gotten caught too, and Tobias would have killed her probably in front of Khalil just to prove a point. He is saying that he's going to leave the Pierce girl alone, which is kind of interesting considering the fact is he has the history he does with the Pierce family. So I'm sure that kind of plays a bit of motivation in his particular interest in the, you know, Pierce family, especially, you know, the connection to Black Lightning and Thunder, that whole situation. So I'm blanking on her name now because it's been a little while. I hate myself for forgetting, but the lady that Anissis, you know, got back with again, I'm blanking on her name. Oh, it's gonna bother the crap out of me. Remember, she's kind of got her own thing going on. So could that be connected to these super metas? Could that be, like, because I was always wondering, I was like, how did, you know, because her situation doesn't necessarily seem like it's a green light situation. Maybe it is, but it seemed like it was something else entirely. She might be older than what she seems. Like at some point in time, she might have woken up from the clinic and just made her way out. Because she might, well, because it seemed like all 4 of the vital signs were there. But, you know, part of me wonders, is it just forever connected to her, or is it still reading like she's in there or something? Like, what if she's actually connected to it? Probably not. Like that, once again, that's a situation we bounce to for a little bit and then we completely bounce back in a way. So it's like we still have no idea what her whole deal is. Also, I quickly looked it up. Her name was Grace. That bothered the crap out. I kept thinking like a G or something, but I couldn't remember. But look, yeah, the whole Grace situation, that's something we still have not dealt with. So that's definitely very interesting. Obviously, I'm assuming this is going to be the end of the whole like rebellion chapter. So I'm curious to see like, or rather, rebellion book. No, I'm forgetting like the books and the chapters. This is chapter 3 of the rebellion book, but I'm curious like what the next step in all of this is. Like, I'm very interested to find out about these super metas, as well as just like where this whole thing is going to go now with the whole Khalil and Jennifer storyline. Like, I mean, now that she's back home too, no matter what ends up happening with Khalil, like, she already had problems with her family. She was slowly in the process of, like I said, forgiving him, but now this comes up. Like, is that going to cause issues or what? Are we going to see Jennifer kind of stepping up, you know, because it's like, for her, it's like she has ample reason to go after Tobias now too, much like Jeff's situation is about his dad, and in this case it's about her boyfriend, and plus on top of that the whole aspect of also my grandfather too. So I'm curious to see if that plays in any shape or form what's going to happen going forward. So we'll just have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time with me, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.